effectivement avoir le texte de mon intervention.
It's both my honor and pleasure to be here in Cameroon, a land of long history, great diversity, and overflowing energy. And above all, a land of a magnificent soccer player, Samuel Eto'o. I may not know too much of soccer, but I do know enough to recognize Eto'o's athleticism. Not only that, Cameroon and Korea boast a long diplomatic relations since 1961, soon after Cameroon's independence. In many regards, I'm truly delighted to be here in Cameroon, especially in the presence of President Biya of the Republic of Cameroon and honored guests. We are here today with one topic in mind: investing in Cameroon. As a former Prime Minister of the Republic of Korea, I have been asked to share Korea's experience of rapid economic growth, to shed light on what Cameroon could do in order to speed up her economic growth and boost her attractiveness to foreign investors. Now, former President Barroso of European Commission just gave a wonderful speech, and it puts a lot of pressure on me, but I will do my best to share with you lessons from Korea's development from a nation in poverty into one of the largest economies in the world. Among the countries in the world which have the population of more than 50 million, Korea ranks 7th in terms of per capita GDP, following the US, Japan, Germany, the UK, France, and Italy. I will present my speech in the following order. I'll first briefly talk about Korea's fast economic growth, because not everyone is familiar with the story. Afterwards, I will explain what made it possible for Korea to grow so fast. And then I will finish by drawing conclusive messages for Cameroon from lessons Korea has learned. Korea underwent a series of unfortunate events in the first half of the 20th century. In 1910, Korea was colonized by Japan, which marked the beginning of one of the darkest periods Korea had ever experienced. Korea fiercely resisted and fought Japan's colonial rule and regained her independence in 1945 at the end of the World War II. Nonetheless, the Cold War immediately set in, and Korea was divided into North and South Koreas. In the southern half of the peninsula, the Republic of Korea was founded in 1948 under the auspices of the United Nations. The joy of a new beginning for the Republic of Korea didn't last long. Only 2 years later, in 1950, the Korean War broke out. During 3 years of devastating warfare, over 4 million people were killed or wounded. The infrastructure of the economy was severely destroyed. Seoul was almost completely burnt to ashes, and orphans and refugees roamed the cities and the countryside searching for their lost loved ones. Malnutrition and disease were everywhere. I still have memories of the difficult times both during and after the war. Towards the end of the 1950s, Korea's per capita GDP ranked 101st out of 125 nations. In 1962, Korea's per capita GDP was less than $100. over 40% of the nation's population suffered from absolute poverty, and it seemed as if there was no way out. But in 2015, Korea recorded approximately 28,000 US dollars in per capita GDP. This value, when converted into purchasing power, is higher than that of Italy and approaches the average per capita GDP of EU nations. Korea's GDP recorded 11th in 2015 with 1.4 trillion US dollars. Korea is the first and the only nation to transition from a foreign aid recipient nation to a donor nation in the world history. Some people refer this achievement as the Korean miracle. Natural question to ask would be, how did Korea do it? Numerous scholars have asked the same question and analyzed Korea's economic development in search of an answer. There cannot be one right answer to this question, but I will share a few points that stand out for me personally. First point I would like to mention is Korea's export-led growth strategy. Most economists agree that Korea's success lies in the adoption of such strategy as well. But focus is on the word strategy, not on export-led growth. If export-led growth policy is the universal key to rapid growth for all developing nations, why have some countries that have adopted this policy not been as successful as Korea? Korea is not endowed with rich natural resources. She has limited supplies of coal, iron, tungsten, limestone, and kaolin, while other resources are scarce or non-existent. Arable land accounts for just 20% of total land. Climate, soil, rainfall, and temperature are all unfavorable to agricultural production. On the other hand, Korea has advantage in human capital. Even right after the end of the Korean War, population of Korea was increasing at about 3% per year. In addition, Korea is among the most densely populated countries in the world, with 517 people per square kilometer, which is one of the highest in the world. This meant that Korea had widespread surplus labor at its initial phase of development with low wage rate. This accounts for one of the key differences between Korea and other nations. In addition, it takes more than labor surplus to develop manufacturing industries effectively. The labor force has to be equipped with those attributes required for modern industrial activities. For example, a minimum standard of literacy, discipline, and a desire to get ahead. Furthermore, there has to be vigorous entrepreneurship, administrative skill, and efficiency in government. In this regard, Korea was well equipped for manufacturing. Years of subsisting on scarce land have nurtured strong survival traits such as tenacity and pragmatism. The potential labor force was largely literate and ready to work long hours for low wages. Many entrepreneurs with a can-do spirit emerged. They took advantage of the government policy encouraging investment with favorable bank loans and allocation of foreign exchange. In short, we cannot say that export-led growth strategy is the key to fast economic growth in all developing nations. Rather, it takes a careful analysis of the nation and deliberate economic planning in accordance with the analysis. Cameroun is located in a geographically strategic area, has rich agricultural resources, and English and French-speaking people. How do these advantages translate into a strategy is the job for this conference. But it is imperative to devise a plan that accounts for Cameroon's advantages and disadvantages. In that sense, Cameroon's Vision 2035 and three-year emergency plan for 2015 to 2017 appears to be a good starting point, and I hope that lessons from Korea will help Cameroon execute its plan as intended. Second, a focus on education and investment in human capital was critical. With no significant natural resources or accumulated capital, South Korea had to rely on highly educated workforce to drive economic growth. Passion for education has a long heritage in Korea. Perhaps a famous anecdote will help you to understand the Korean people's attitude toward education. It involves a 16th century scholar, Seokbong Han, who is recognized as one of the foremost calligraphers in Korean history. I will refer to him as Han. Han's mother, despite her desire to keep her son by her side, sent him to a Buddhist temple in the mountain so that he could focus on studies away from distractions. Some years later, still immature and unmotivated, Han returned home one day and told his mother that he no longer wished to pursue calligraphy. Although she was delighted to see her son again, she was determined to see him finish his education. His mother, who was supporting Han by selling rice cake in the marketplace, proposed a contest. They would turn the candlelight off, and if Han could write calligraphy better, then she could slice the rice cake in complete darkness, then he could do whatever he wanted. When they turned the candlelight back on, Han's calligraphy was humiliating at best, while each piece of the rice cake sliced by his mother boasted perfect form and size. Realizing that his studies and practice didn't come close to completion, Han was humbled and returned to the temple, determined never to return home until he could be the best calligrapher in Joseon Dynasty. Can you imagine yourself in place of Han? First, your mom sends you off to a remote temple in the mountains. When you return, she scolds you for being immature and sends you back until you make enough progress in your studies. This is how much the Koreans value education. The tradition still pushes Korean people to study more and to work harder. I myself had numerous helpers and mentors who allowed me to fulfill my academic pursuits. I was born in a countryside, and during my elementary school years, my family couldn't afford even my lunches. My mother worked at a hospital washing clothes to support my siblings and me during the tough post-war years. She kept reminding me of a confidence that a bright future awaited me so that poverty wouldn't discourage me. I worked as a tutor since the high school years all the way through college to earn tuitions, but I never neglected my own academics. Besides my mother, I had others who imbued me with confidence throughout my youth. They all had a passion for education. Without the conviction of my supporters and professors, my academic path from the countryside to Seoul to the United States, and myself today would not have been possible. Thank you. The third factor for South Korea's rise is the can-do or fighting spirit of the Korean people that I had briefly mentioned earlier. This type of spirit is crucial to every successful entrepreneur. During the rapid industrialization process, many South Koreans worked tremendously hard to help themselves, their families, and their communities to climb out of poverty and build a foundation for a market-driven society. Wherever there were jobs, our young men and women went to faraway countries to grab the opportunities. In the 1960s, South Koreans went to then West Germany to work as coal miners and nurses. Impressed with the Korean work ethic, the West German government was one of the first friends to extend to South Korea industrial development loans. In the 1970s, with the construction boom in the Middle East, so many South Korean construction workers helped to build key infrastructures and development projects in the region. The wages these workers earned and sent back home allowed their families to send their children to college. At the end of the 1990s, South Korea overcame the Asian financial crisis in only a couple of years. The crisis of 1997 to 1998 was South Korea's own Great Depression. Almost a third of the nation's banks and lending institutions went under, and in a span of months, only 7% of workers were out of jobs. South Korea came out of the crisis thanks to collective willpower of its citizens who spent less, saved more, worked harder, increased exports, and strove to be more competitive. So far, I have discussed the factors accounting for Korea's rapid economic growth. Careful economic planning and deliberate execution, value of education, and can-do spirit of the Korean people account for some of the reasons behind Korea's economic development. But that is not the end of the story. Korea may have achieved an economic miracle, but whether that miracle is a sustainable one remains questionable due to polarization of wealth and sluggish economic growth in recent years. Korea's economic development in the formative years adopted theory of unbalanced growth. That is, Korean government allocated resources to industries that exhibited highest potentials instead of distributing resources throughout all industries. The strategy was successful in growing the economy, but at the cost of economic equality. In other words, corporations that benefited from the government's policies became global conglomerates today, but their economic influences are overshadowing small and medium enterprises, also known as SMEs. Gini coefficient in Korea is rising fast, and wealth is being polarized, where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And the economic growth rate is not as high as it once used to be. A list of solutions would include well-educated population, many engineers, designers, and other professionals, enormous deposits of knowledge, educated capital, strong public education, efficient economic institutions, and legal system congenial to the promotion of entrepreneurship, etc., etc. But I'd like to emphasize that the solution can be summed up as two words: shared growth. It may be unconventional to discuss topics like shared growth in developing nations, but I propose Cameroun to keep shared growth in mind, because first, the vicious cycle of rich gets richer and poor gets poorer is extremely difficult to break after the country's economy grows. And second, shared growth will help Cameroon find a more sustainable model for economic growth. To briefly explain, shared growth is a philosophy that promotes economically growing together. Various scholars in different fields may refer to it with a slightly different name. For example, Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders uses the term inclusive economy, which shares similar ideas with shared growth. What is more important than what we call it is what growing together truly means. By growing together, shared growth aims to promote fairer distribution without curbing vigorous economic growth. People sometimes misconstrue shared growth as another distribution mechanism that takes away from the rich and gives it away to the poor. I do not blame them, because traditionally growth and distribution were in an or relationship. You could pursue either growth or distribution in economics. If you wanted to push for economic growth, distribution had to take a back seat. Likewise, distributing wealth meant that you were giving up growth. Shared growth says otherwise. Economic growth and distribution of wealth are not at opposite sides of the spectrum. Growth and distribution can be achieved at the same time by growing the economic pie bigger and distributing the fruit of the growth fairly amongst contributors. I will explain the concept with a hypothetical scenario. Let's say that Korea's economic output on GDP in 2015 is 100, and that 50% of the output went to the major conglomerates, while the other 50% went to SMEs. Now, let's imagine that Korean economy grew by 20% in 2016, bringing Korea's GDP up to 120. But this time, let's make distribution fairer. Conglomerates take away 45%, while SMEs get 55%. Both parties benefit from the growth because income of the conglomerates went up from 50 to 54, while the income of the SMEs went up from 50 to 66. In other words, the real problem of the Korean economy is that while the SMEs contribute more than 50% of the work, they get much less than what they deserve. When you make the distribution process fairer and pay the SMEs for what they really deserve, we can achieve growth and distribution at the same time. In short, shared growth is about securing the justice in the process of distributing growth fruit. Instead of pursuing economic growth for the sake of growth, shared growth will help Cameroon grow in a healthier and sustainable way. The concept of shared growth can be extended to building cooperative relations with other nations as well. In today's world of highly connectivity, a nation cannot do it alone. Even back in the 1950s, Korea worked with great friends who cared. In response to the UN Security Council Resolution 84, 16 countries came to South Korea's aid during the Korean War. Young men and women from these far-flung lands came and shed their precious blood to defend a country they had not even known and a people they had never met. The proud flags representing these 16 countries fly daily at the War Memorial of Korea in Seoul to commemorate those courageous soldiers. After the war, our allies and the UN lent a valuable hand in rebuilding our war-torn nation. Currently, South Korean agencies and corporations implement diverse humanitarian projects in all corners of the globe to reciprocate the generosity and goodwill that we as a nation received from our dear friends around the world. Likewise, Cameroun must work together with its friends to make a breakthrough, especially so in today's global world. And shared growth philosophy will help her build cooperative relations with other nations. Today, I talked about Korea's rapid economic growth and factors accounting for it. And I added a few remarks about what Cameroun might do differently in order to grow in a healthier and more sustainable way. Each country is different. Cameroun is a much bigger country than Korea with less population. But I do believe that emphasis of education and high spirits to excel are universal factors that will help any nation go far. I have no doubt that Cameroon's strategic plans with shared growth in mind will help her build her own economic growth model, and that other nations in the future will be asking, how did Cameroon do it? In recent years, South Korea led initiatives to enhance the international development aid model. In addition to assisting struggling countries with funds and materials or the hardware, Korea has also emphasized the provision of software for economic development, such as strengthening public education, creating efficient economic development and infrastructure plans, and building social welfare networks. I sincerely hope that Cameroon will continue to work together with Korea and that the two nations will share their growths. It was truly an honor and privilege for me to speak in front of honored guests today. And with that, I would like to conclude my speech. Thank you very much for your attention.
Je remercie le docteur Woon Chang-Chung pour son intervention. Et je donne la parole à M. Tony Elumelu, président directeur général de United Bank for Africa.
Your Excellency, President Paul Biya, distinguished members of the Cameroon government, fellow guest speakers, investors and entrepreneurs, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Sorry, my voice is bad, but His Excellency cannot invite you to this wonderful gathering and you not honor it. As the chairman of United Bank for Africa, with presence in 19 African countries, and founder of the Tony Elumelu Foundation, it is a pleasure to be here with you this morning to discuss how to attract and deepen investment in the Republic of Cameroon. I want to thank His Excellency, President Biya, for being such a gracious host and for bringing all of us together for this important dialogue. This is not only a good time for Cameroon to be having this conversation, it is indeed a smart time to be having it. As we speak, the giant economies of Africa, such as South Africa, Nigeria, and Angola, are dealing with some economic challenges. But countries like Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, and Cameroon are experiencing what has been reported as economic booms, expressed in the growth rate of their countries. Foresight and foreplanning can hopefully help countries to manage their economies better at a time like this. Cameroon's $28 billion economy is doing very well and growing at an impressive rate of 5.5%. But because of foresight, the President and Cameroonians have chosen this as the right time to think about what it takes to attract and to retain investors in Cameroon. As a long-term banker and entrepreneur, I have learned how to spot a good investment, and I'm pleased to affirm to all investors present here that Cameroon is indeed a great place to invest. I speak from experience, and I know this because of the United Bank for Africa, which I chair, and which serves over 11 million customers in 19 African countries, including Cameroon, started operation here in 2008, and we have been here ever since. In fact, our initial rollout in Africa started, Cameroon was the second country we came to, and the first in Francophone, all of Francophone Africa. In the short time that we've operated here, United Bank for Africa has been making a positive impact in the communities we serve and the country as a whole. Through our many branches, we are helping to create employment, not only by lending to our customers to start and expand their businesses and hire people, but also by hiring Cameroonian citizens to help run our various operations, both in Cameroon and outside. But even more significant, UBA has been able to leverage our foothold in Cameroon to recruit and deploy Cameroonians to serve at senior levels in other subsidiaries. So when the past president of European Union talked about education, I wanted to add that my experience operating in Cameroon, 14 branches, shows that you have very good human capital in Cameroon. I say this because in the 8 years of operation in Cameroon, we have had to export from Cameroon 3 people as chief executive officers of UBA in other countries. I'm pleased to say further that because of the welcoming investment environment in Cameroon, we are growing stronger, and even this year, we're going to open more branches. Last night, I discussed with the minister in charge of lands. He said, Your Excellency, and I requested her to kindly allocate a piece of land to UBA in Yaoundé and Douala for us to build our head offices. Investors take decisions like this only when and where they are comfortable. And we're doing this because we have confidence in the business environment. We're here and we are long-term investors. But let me add that UBA's strategy and investments in Cameroun are not a happy coincidence or simply driven by the pursuit of profit maximization. They are consistent with the philosophy that guides our investments and my investments and aspirations for the economic development of our continent. I believe that the private sector has a role to play in advancing Africa's development. I believe that we must recognize and embrace that responsibility by making long-term investments in strategic sectors which deliver economic dividends for shareholders and social dividends for society. And this is what I call African capitalism. Our last speaker, the Prime Minister, talked about shared growth, shared prosperity, then put in the words of the World Bank president. I call it African capitalism because the private sector, no one but us will develop Africa, and our private sector must rise to play its own role in developing Africa. If we do that, your concern will not manifest. If it does, not in the dimension that you saw it. And in fact, it's arguable. You could ask, and I'd like to advise our president here and government executives. Whilst it's been advised that you should be very careful about strong private sector, I wonder if South Korea would have developed if they didn't have the likes of companies that helped take them to where they are. Imagine what would have been the fate of America without iPhone or Apple or Microsoft Bill Gates. The truth is, in the 21st century, the world should move and operate in a manner that is more of the genius of ant and the tyranny of all. It shouldn't be this against the other. We need very strong private sector to work hand in hand with government to help address society's challenges. Government alone cannot do it. I believe that financial services is one of those strategic sectors that we need to be emphasizing in driving economic prosperity. I have therefore undertaken long-term investments in this sector, and it has proven to be successful in over a dozen countries in which we operate, including Cameroon. So the genius is how to further attract private sector investments to Cameroon and to retain it. I have always argued that there's a lot of global private capital, and this global private capital is looking for destination, but it's looking for the right kind of destination where it is welcomed. And so to talk about how to attract investment that will lead to economic prosperity of Cameroon in a manner that drives and supports inclusive growth, we need to improve, continue to improve our operating environment so that to attract this private capital that is looking for destination. I'd like to share two quick examples or experiences. First, in the area of power. Power is so critical for the economic development of our continent, and the past president talked about it, about infrastructure, power. And there's a lot of private capital looking for the right destination. Yet, in the 21st century, all across Africa, access to electricity remains a challenge and continues to affect our ability to grow. But we have the private sector capital that can come into this space. Why is it not being applied here? Because elementary economics will tell us that there's market. If people don't have a commodity, a product, then it's a good market for you to sell. It is because of the kind of investment policies that some of our governments have put in place. And it does reduce the enthusiasm of the private sector to want to do more. When the privatization process in Nigeria was commenced, my group committed a lot of resources in that space, and our intent was to generate 25% of the country's electricity consumption. Today, we generate about 19% of Nigeria's total electricity consumption, but we can do more. But certain policies did not support our intent. We mobilized capital to do more. But thanks to the new government, there's improvement. At least the tariff is now cost reflective, and a lot of things begin to happen in that space again. But if we had continued at that trajectory we took off with, today the story might have started to change. So policies, good policies help a lot. A second case is we know the challenges we have in Africa moving from one point to the other. Economic integration in Africa can actually not occur in the manner that we desire if we cannot move people freely, we cannot move goods freely, and we cannot move capital freely. And so talking about movement of people and goods, we, in 2006-07, I led a group of investors who partnered with Richard Branson, Virgin, to set up Air Nigeria, Virgin Air Nigeria, which is a partnership between the local investors owning 51% and Virgin Atlantic owning 49%. We wanted to open up Africa using Nigeria as a hub. But again, policies did not allow this. After 2 years, we had to just disband it. And my group, we wrote off about $200 million for this. This inconsistency of policies don't help to attract investment to the continent. And so if we address this, it will help to bring more investment to our continent. And Cameroun that is doing well already, 5.5. Once you continue to encourage investors, more people will come to the continent, to the country. And as more investors come, it has a way of attracting others to come. Like I'm standing here telling the world, I'm an investor in Cameroon, and it's been a wonderful experience. It will encourage others to also come to Cameroon to invest. The second thing I want to talk about, a way we can also help to attract investment, is what I call promotion of local entrepreneurship. So here I align with the former Prime Minister. So you might ask yourself, how does the promotion of local entrepreneurship help to attract investment? The truth is, as an investor, and I have friends across the globe, investors want to go to economies or countries where there's vibrant local entrepreneurship, where there's vibrant local entrepreneurs, because it is a telling factor. If the local entrepreneurs are doing well, it tells me as an investor that one, the market is good, and two, that there are enabling environments that are helping them to grow. So if we want to attract investment to our country, let charity start from home. Let us and again, I believe that what the government is doing is very commendable, even organizing, creating the awareness for this type of session at a time that the economy is doing well, because most people do this when the economy is going down. It's very encouraging. All we just need to do is to put heads together further and see how we can continue to improve the conditions. Cameroon has human capital of 22 million people who can be the engine for your economic growth. And this is true of all of Africa. And that's what the former president called the demographic boom, which could actually become demographic doom if we don't deal with it or address it. While other regions of the world have aging populations, Africa's youth dominate our demographic. This means that Africa itself is poised to become the engine of global economic growth. One of the speakers said that Africa is an economic growth reserve. I think maybe this is what he meant, because I was asking my what's the meaning of growth reserve. But we need to now make sure that Africa, it's not just the characterization of Africa rising, that we begin to feel the impact. And the way to do it is make sure we invest in our young people. Our governments and corporations and private sector alone cannot provide enough jobs for more than the 200 million young Africans entering the workforce by 2030. Therefore, one of the keys to winning the demographic dividend is entrepreneurship. At the micro level, entrepreneurship is a bottom-up approach to economic growth and development that empowers the individual to find and pursue the best opportunities in their current environment to improve their own economic circumstances. It also drives the creation of homegrown solutions to local problems in core areas such as food, education, health, water, and sanitation, to mention but a few. At the macro level, it is the expression of African solutions to African economic problems. Entrepreneurship means Africans have options for advancement that are not limited to just finding a job. They can create their own employment opportunity as well as for others and transform their communities and even our continent. My belief in the inherent capacity of Africans to be successful entrepreneurs, if they have the right tools, is so resolute that through the Tony Elumelu Foundation's entrepreneurship program, I have invested $100 million over the next 10 years to identify, mentor, train, and seed 10,000 African startups. Over the first 2 years of the program, we selected the best 2,000 ideas from the more than 65,000 applications received from 53 out of Africa's 54 countries, irrespective of their age, gender, nationality, level of education, or sector. All that the selectees needed was a transformative idea and a drive to succeed, and we gave them a chance. The first batch have already completed their training and received their first tranche of seed capital. And I'm proud to say that 44 of Cameroon's finest young men and women are part of the program. And I met with them and our Cameroonian mentors last night at the Hilton Hotel here. A good 25% of them have keyed into the president's vision on agriculture. They have their eyes set on agriculture sector and will do much more to promote nutrition and food security in this country. And they are all very brilliant. Most of them are graduates. Among these Cameroonian and African entrepreneurs could be the next Steve Jobs, the next Aliko Dangote, and I think the next Tony Elumelu. And there are many, many more aspiring African entrepreneurs out there who also deserve a chance, if only succeeding private sector leaders and our governments can work together to prioritize how we support entrepreneurs. My dream for Cameroon is that in the next few years, not I, but a Cameroonian Tony Elumelu entrepreneur will be standing on this stage telling you about his or her investments in Cameroon and how it is creating thousands of jobs and generating revenues for the government of Cameroon while making profit and meeting local demands. That is Afro-capitalism. That is shared prosperity. That is shared and inclusive growth. So I would like my foundation, the Tony Elumelu Foundation, to partner with the government of Cameroon to put into place concrete programs and policies that encourage more young Cameroonians to start businesses and to support them to succeed. Tough registration hurdles, multiple tax jurisdictions, onerous reporting requirements, and lack of access to finance can indeed extinguish millions of businesses before they start. But all of these are fixable, and once done, will fast-track Cameroon's economic transformation in a manner that is truly enduring and lasting. In closing, I want to again commend President Biya and the government of Cameroon for thinking about investing in Cameroon during the good times and planning ahead for a stable and attractive economy that stimulates investments from within and welcomes investors from outside. I am honored, Mr. President, as your neighbor and your junior brother, to be a part of the discussion. And rest assured, I'm a long-term investor in Cameroon and a happy one at that. I invite you all to join me in investing in Cameroon. Thank you very much.
United Bank for Africa pour son intervention. Avant de suspendre nos travaux, je vais donner la parole au chef du protocole qui doit nous donner quelques indications.
La cérémonie officielle d'ouverture de la conférence prendra fin avec la photo souvenir à l'entrée du bâtiment. Autour du chef de l'État prendront place les personnalités qui l'entourent sur le podium, le président du Sénat, le président de l'Assemblée nationale, le premier ministre chef du gouvernement et les intervenants aux tables rondes et ateliers. Ils ont reçu un papillon à cet effet. Les autres participants et invités sont priés de bien vouloir patienter quelques instants en restant dans la salle. Je vous remercie.
2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 6, 1, 2. Not only to the biggest conglomerates, but also to small and medium-sized enterprises that are promising and that show. Voilà, retour sur ce forum Investir au Cameroun, quelle est l'activité en direct du Palais des Congrès de Yaoundé. Les discours inauguraux sont terminés. On a suivi celui du président Biya, discours d'honneur donné par José Manuel Barroso, lequel est d'ailleurs revenu sur quelques constats qu'il a fait, quelques conseils aussi. L'Afrique ne fait pas assez de commerce avec elle-même. Il faut favoriser la création d'une classe moyenne. Il a estimé que l'Afrique était un réservoir en termes de croissance, par exemple. Il y a eu ce discours sur l'expérience sud-coréenne de M. Chung Eun-chan, ancien Premier ministre de la République de Corée entre 2009 et 2010, qui est un docteur en économie. Et enfin, Tony Elumelu, qui a réaffirmé le souhait de sa fondation, la fondation qu'il dirige et qui favorise l'entrepreneuriat en Afrique. Ce souhait-là de voir sa fondation établir un partenariat durable avec les pays africains, notamment avec le Cameroun. On va donc passer dans quelques instants à la suite du programme qui va concerner bien sûr les tables rondes. Il y en aura 4. La première va concerner donc la situation macroéconomique du Cameroun, les perspectives de croissance. Et il y aura comme intervenant M. Louis-Paul Moutassé, qui est le ministre de l'économie, de la planification et de l'aménagement du territoire du Cameroun. Il y aura M. Kadima Kalondi, qui est le représentant résident au Cameroun du Fonds monétaire international. Il y aura M. Racine Khan, le représentant résident au Cameroun de la Banque africaine de développement. Il y aura M. Lucas Abaganchama, qui est le gouverneur de la Banque des États de l'Afrique centrale, la BEAC. Alors ce premier panel-là va donc se positionner dans quelques instants. Vous pourrez bien sûr le suivre en direct tout au long de la journée. Je vous ai dit, il y aura 4 tables rondes. La deuxième concernera le regard croisé sur le rôle du secteur privé dans la croissance en Afrique. Et c'est une table ronde où vous retrouverez M. Adé Ayeyemi, que nous avons reçu il y a quelques instants, qui est le directeur général du groupe Ecobank Transnational Incorporated. Il y aura M. Daniel Cohen, M. Pascal Lamy, président éméritus Institut Jacques Delors, ancien directeur général de l'OMC, que nous avons aussi reçu en ouverture de cette conférence. M. Donald Kaberuka, le 7e président de la Banque africaine de développement entre 2005 et 2015, et le Dr Acha Leke, qui est partenaire associé senior à McKinsey et compagnie. Nous aurons l'occasion, bien sûr, à chaque fois de venir vous présenter ce qui est en train de se passer, de prendre quelques personnalités que nous aurons triées sur le volet. On se retrouve dans quelques instants.